Hey guys, I'm JC and today we're having a Ratadrabik gameplay marathon to celebrate the most popular commander in the casual commander Discord group, Ratadrabik. This deck aims to use aristocratic as well as reanimation effects to make a token army of legendary creatures to take out its opponents. If you want to build this deck yourself, then make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech as well as other gameplay videos showing how the deck was built as well as how it plays out. In addition, we also have a Discord group with a channel dedicated specifically to Ratadrabik, so if you'd like to join the gang and discuss all things Ratadrabik related, then make sure to check out the link in the description below. Let's show our opponents that true legends never die. Alright guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Ian Malcolm Chaotician, we have Zuladok Voidgorger, and finally we have Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos. Okay, so if we take a look at our opening hand, I think it's quite good. Ono Shaku is a very powerful mana ramp piece in this deck. We have card draw and Deadly Dispute as well as Mangara, and we have an enhancing effect in Mondrak that's going to allow us to double our tokens and any legends that we sacrifice. Really all we need here is basically a sack outlet, but I think this is a pretty good hand, so we'll keep it. Ian starts us off by playing a land for turn, and then they pass the turn. Zuladok plays a land. Next they cast a Soul Ring, and that's it for their turn. Hidetsugu plays a land, and then they pass to us. We draw a swamp for turn. Okay, we'll start by playing our fetch land. We'll crack it right away, and we'll put our Godless Shrine into the battlefield tapped. And that is it for us. Ian plays a land. Now they cast a Kami of the Crescent Moon. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Okay, well that's an effect that we're happy to see. I mean, not liking that Zuladok's going to be able to have that with the turn 1 Soul Ring, but hopefully we can abuse it better than they can. On Zuladok's draw step, Kami triggers. They play a land. Next they cast a Lightning Greaves. Equipped creature has haste and shroud. And that is it for them. On Hidetsugu's draw step, Kami triggers. They play a land for turn. And now they Mountain Cycle a Ruin Grinder. And that's it for their turn. On our draw step, Kami triggers. Looks like we draw a Leaden Mirror as well as a Plumb the Forbidden. Okay, well next we're going to play our Swamp. And then we're going to cast our Leaden Mirror. And that is it for our turn. On Ian's draw step, Kami triggers. Now they move to combat. They decide not to attack. And it looks like they're actually passing the turn there. So they've missed a land drop. They're going to have to discard a card here, and they discard a Wheel of Misfortune. Zuladok's draw step, Kami triggers. After that, they play a land. Now they cast a Geode Golem. It has trample, and whenever Golem deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone without paying its mana cost. Next, they move to equip their Lightning Greaves to the Geode Golem. Now they move to combat. The Golem goes towards the Ian player. They allow it to go through. That triggers Geode Golem. So now they cast their commander. All the spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade, Cascade. Next they move to equip their Lightning Greaves to their commander. And then they pass the turn. On Hidetsugu's draw step, Kami triggers. Next they play a land. And then they Swamp Cycle an Igneous Pouncer. And that is going to be it for their turn. Now they will have to go to discard here. And they just discard a land. I think we'll have to be careful and keep our eye on them because they are probably setting themselves up for something like a Living Death. Now we also draw a Dance of the Dead for turn. And Kami triggers as well. And that draws us into an Urborg. Okay, so let's play our Plaza of Heroes. And then I think we'll cast our Mangara. On Ian's draw step, Kami triggers. Let's see if they hit their land drop this turn. And it looks like they do. And now they cast their commander, Ian Malcolm Chaotician. Whenever a player draws their second card each turn, that player exiles the top card of their library. During each player's turn, that player may cast a spell from among the cards they don't own exiled with Ian, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. They move to combat, but they decide not to attack, and that is it for their turn. Kami triggers on Zuladok's draw step. Then that triggers Ian. And it looks like a Thran Dynamo's exiled underneath there. That might be something we try to take if we get a chance. Next, Zuladok plays a land for turn. Then they activate their War Room, drawing a card. They move to combat. Zuladok's going towards us, and the Golem's going toward Hidetsugu. We're going to take the damage. And then they pass the turn. On Hidetsugu's draw step, Kami triggers. That triggers Ian. And they exile a Cavern Horde Dragon. That's a pretty powerful creature. especially against the Zuladoc player. Next, they play a land. And now they cast a Thran Dynamo underneath Ian. So they got to it before we did. But that is going to be it for them. They'll have to go to discard. And they just discard a land. Now we draw a Roaming Throne, really good card. And Kami also triggers on our draw step. And we get a Malakir Rebirth, another good card. But that does trigger Ian. So let's see what they steal from us. Hopefully nothing too good. And they just get a Carrion Feeder. Certainly could be a lot worse than that. So let's play our Urborg. Next we'll cast our Honor Worn Shaku. And now we should be able to cast our Commander. And then I think we'll pass the turn from there. On Ian's draw step, Kami triggers. That triggers their Commander. And they exile a Howling Mine. Next they play a land. Then they cast an Izzet Signet. And then they cast a Temple Bell. That does trigger our Mangara, so we'll draw a card. We just get a land. And Temple Bell says tap, each player draws a card. They activate that right away. We get ourselves another land. That'll also trigger Ian. And it looks like they get a Yosei from us. That's a really good creature. Too bad that they stole that one. But that is going to be it for them. Zuladoc's draw step, Kami triggers. That triggers Ian. And he gets a Solemn Simulacrum. Zuladoc plays a land. Then they cast the Cavern Horde Dragon. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. Fly and trample haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. Now they move to combat. The Golem comes towards us. Zuladoc goes towards Ian, and the Cavern Horde Dragon goes towards Hidetsugu. Once again, we're not going to block. And it looks like Ian doesn't either. Now Cavern Horde Dragon will trigger. So they make a treasure token there. And then they pass the turn. On the draw step, Kami triggers. That triggers Ian. This time they get a Cabal Coffers. Next they play a land. And then they cast the Solemn Simulacrum. When it ETBs, it triggers, so they get to search for a basic land and put it into play tapped. And after that, they activate their Terrain Generator, put in a basic land card from their hand onto the battlefield tapped. And finally, they cast a Blasphemous Act. That does trigger our Mangara. And we get ourselves a Command the Dreadhorde, the perfect answer to this. So now all the creatures get wiped. We're actually going to leave Ratadrabik in the graveyard. Solemn and Ratadrabik both trigger. So we'll make a token copy of Mangara. Solemn's going to draw a card. And that is going to be it for them. On our turn, we draw a land. So let's play a land for turn. And now let's cast our Command the Dreadhorde. We're going to choose our Commander. We'll take Mangara. We'll bring back our Ledenmere. We'll definitely take the Solemn for a bit of ramp. And we're going to take that Cavern Horde Dragon. I think that should be enough. That's going to be 23 life out of 27 that we have. Let's see if we can resolve this. And it does go through. When Solemn ETBs, it triggers, so we get to search for a basic land. We're going to put a Plains into play. Now we'll move to combat. Send Mangara towards Zuladoc, as well as our Cavern Horde Dragon. Damage goes through, that triggers our Cavern Horde Dragon. We make 3 treasure tokens. Next, we're going to use our Honor Worn Shaku. And we're going to cast our Mondrak. And I think that's going to be it for us. Now, we do have to move to our cleanup step because we have one card that we need to get rid of here. And I think we'll just get rid of a land. Ian starts by casting a Thought Vessel. Now they have no maximum hand size. Then they cast a Chasm Skulker. That triggers both of our Mangaras. We draw an Agadeem's Awakening as well as another land. Chasm Skulker says whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on it, and whenever it dies, create X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on it. Next, they activate their Temple Bell. That also triggers their Chasm Skulker. And we just draw a land. And that seems to be it for their turn. Zuladoc plays a land. Then they recast their commander. Next, they move to equip their Lightning Greaves to their commander. After that, they move to combat. And it looks like we have one of our opponents scooping it up there. Zuladoc decides not to attack, and then they pass the turn. Now they will also have to go to discard here. And they just get rid of a land. Hidetsugu starts by casting a Noxious Gearhulk. It has Menace, and when it ETBs, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. Well, no doubt they target one of our creatures here, but the question is going to be which one do they target? Luckily, we do have a Malakir Rebirth in hand with a treasure token up, so we are going to be able to answer anything that we don't necessarily want removed, like our commander. But it looks like they're actually targeting our Mangara. Well, that might be a bit of a mistake for them. I don't think they realize when that dies, we're actually going to get 2 token copies back. So we're going to let that go through. Mangara goes down. That triggers our commander. Now we make 2 Mangaras to replace it. Next, they swamp cycle a Troll of Khazad-dûm. Then they play a land, but they have it come into play tapped. And finally, they activate their terrain generator. And that is going to be it for their turn. We draw a command tower. Okay, well, let's start by casting our Malakir Rebirth targeting our Mondrak. That's going to take us down to 4 life. Then we're going to cast our Deadly Dispute. We're going to sacrifice our Mondrak. That's going to trigger our Ratadrabik as well as our Mondrak. We'll make sure to put Ratadrabik's trigger at the bottom. So Mondrak will come back first. Now we're going to make 2 more Mondraks. And now when Deadly Dispute resolves, we're not only going to draw 2 cards, but we're going to make 8 treasure tokens thanks to all of our Mondraks. And we actually draw Gonti as well as Teysa Karlov. 2 very good draws there. Now we're going to channel our Takenuma. It looks like we just have the choice of 2 Mangaras. Well, we'll bring back our 3 mana one. That's actually going to act as a win con with all of our Mondraks on the battlefield. We're potentially going to be able to exile most of our opponent's permanents if we untap with it. So let's cast Mangara. Now we're going to cast our Gonti. At ETBs, we're going to target the Hidetsugu player. Looks like we just have 2 lands, a Daretti as well as a Fellwar Stone. Well, I think we've probably got to take the Daretti here, because it's going to be able to help us filter to better cards if we need to. Now we'll move to combat. Send our Cavern Horde Dragon towards the Zul'Adok player. And then we'll send our Mangaras towards Hidetsugu. The Noxious Gearhulk blocks one of our Mangaras. When the damage goes through, we go back up to 10 life and our Cavern Horde Dragon triggers. We're about to make a lot of treasure here. Now we're on 20 treasures total. Let's play our command tower. Make sure we don't miss our land drop for turn. And because I don't want magic to actually crash here, I'm actually just going to pass the turn, because if we play Teysa out, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we'll just discard our land because we had too many cards in hand. And if worse comes to worse, we are able to interact at instant speed with our Plum the Forbidden. And we'll just try to dig towards our Gandalf, which essentially allows us to play our legendary spells as well as our artifacts at instant speed. Now Zul'Adok starts by playing a land for turn. And then they cast a Darksteel Monolith. That causes Cascade to trigger twice. Their first hit is a Worn Power Stone, but that triggers both of our Mangaras. So we're going to draw 2 cards. We get an Ornithopter of Paradise as well as a Sheoldred. Their second Cascade hits a Mind Stone. So just mana ramp for the colorless player. Now the Darksteel Monolith is going to allow them to cast 1 large spell for turn. Let's see if they have something in their hand. And they do. They have a Metalwork Colossus at 11 mana. So they're going to be able to pretty much cascade into anything into their deck. And the first hit is an Ornithopter of Paradise. And the second is a Spatial Contortion. Target creature gets +3, -3 until end of turn. Now they do hit our Mangara there, our 3 mana one. That is going to trigger our commander. And we make 8 Mangaras to replace it, so potentially 8 activations to exile permanents. Metalwork Colossus says it costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature artifacts you control, and sack 2 artifacts to return it from your graveyard to your hand. And after that, they cast an Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. That's going to trigger Cascade twice, and they're also going to have the ability to exile 2 target permanents. Well, I think this is where we're actually going to have to step in and interact. But they are cascading first, so I think we'll let them do that. See what they cascade into before we respond. The first is an Unstable Obelisk, a mana rock that can destroy a permanent. The second is an Endless Atlas. Alright, and it looks like they're targeting both of our Mondrak tokens with the Ulamog trigger. Okay, well this is where we respond. So let's cast our Plum the Forbidden. We're going to sacrifice our Leaden Mirror, our Solemn Simulacrum, our Cavern Horde Dragon, our Mondrak, as well as our Gonti. And I think we can actually get rid of our token Mangaras here, because we've certainly drawn enough cards. We may even get rid of a couple of our 3 mana Mangaras as well. And that should hopefully draw us into some sort of answer. Or at the very least, it's going to put a lot of bodies onto the battlefield. So we'll put our Ratadrabik triggers on the bottom. See what we draw into. So Plum the Forbidden is copied 8 times there. So we'll draw 8 and lose 8 life. Alright, well unfortunately that first 8, we didn't get our Gandalf there. See what we draw off Solemn Simulacrum. And we get a Grave Pact. Okay, well let's resolve our Ratadrabik triggers. Now we make 4 Mondrak tokens, and this is about to be a lot of Gontis that hit the battlefield. Let's just hope that Magic Online can handle it and it doesn't crash. Okay, and that's all of our Gontis ETBing. And it looks like I think the Zul'Adok player has 71 cards in their library, so if we target them with all of our Gontis, that should pretty much almost mill them out. I mean, we might leave them with about 6 or 7 cards, but they're certainly going to be lands. So if we were to do this in paper, you just essentially pick up our opponent's deck, leave them with 6 or 7 lands, and then take the rest. But I have a feeling that our opponent probably isn't going to stick around once they realize this. So now we've declared all of our triggers. Our opponent knows we're targeting them now. And yep, they've conceded the game. So it's only the Hidetsugu player left. Okay, well, I've been waiting here for a few minutes, but it looks like our last opponent is probably roping us here. Might not be too happy with what we've done, so I think we'll actually call it here. Well, that is the game done, guys. Let's go to the review and discuss what happened. Well, I think this game demonstrated 2 things. 1, the power of Command the Dreadhorde, and 2, the danger of feeding your opponent's cards. Once our Command the Dreadhorde resolved after that Blasphemous Act, we were in a prime position to get ahead in the game, and this was only helped by the cards that the Ian player was feeding us. Really short of something like a Farewell, there just wasn't much our opponents could do, and you could really see that by the end of the game. Alright, let's move on to game 2. Okay guys, let's see who we're playing this game. First up is Xavier Sal, Infested Captain. Second up is Talion the Kindly Lord. And finally we have Merrin of Clan Nel Toth. Alright, if we have a look at this opening hand, it's pretty good. We have card draw, we have ramp, we have Gandalf, which can essentially give us extra copies of our creatures. We also have some reanimation in Priest of Fell Rites and Gonti, which I love stealing my opponent's spells, so we'll definitely keep this. Start the game by drawing an Ancient Tomb for turn, which is an absolutely great draw. So I think we know what we're doing for this turn. We're going to be playing that Ancient Tomb, and we're going to use it to cast our Orzhov Signet. Pretty much one of the best starts you could hope for in this deck. And then we'll pass the turn. Xavier starts the turn by casting a Mox Diamond, so they can discard a land and it'll essentially tap as a mana rock. They discard a Watery Grave. Next they play a fetch land for turn. They crack it right away. They put a land into play. And then they cast an Arbor Elf, tap to untap target forest. Very strong turn 1 start for Xavier. Now Talion starts their turn by playing a land, but they have it come into play tapped. And then they cast a Mox Amber. Tap, add 1 mana of any color among legendary creatures and planeswalkers you control. And that is going to be it for them. And the Merrin player actually scoops it up. They might be afraid of the strong start all the players had, which is a little bit of a shame. And we also draw a Marsh Flats for turn. Okay, well, let's play that land. Let's crack it. We'll put into play our Scrubland. And now we'll cast our Commander. After that, we'll just ship the turn over. Xavier plays the land. Next, they cast a Vita Spore Thallid. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a Spore counter on it, remove 3 Spore counters from it, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token, and sack a sapling. Target creature gains haste until end of turn. But that is going to be it for them. Talion plays a land. Next, they cast a Demonic Tutor. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, and then shuffle. If they're running a Mox Amber, they might be looking for a Mana Crypt here. But it looks like they don't, and they're just passing the turn to us. We draw a Plaza of Heroes. Okay, we'll start by playing that land. From here, I think our best course of action is to actually hold up our Gandalf, because once we cast that on the end step of the Talion player, then we can set ourselves up to have a really strong turn with Gonti as well as Nasty End. So now we'll move to combat. We'll swing our Rata towards Talion. Great thing about having a Vigilant Commander is that free attack, especially this early in the game. Damage goes through, and then we're just going to pass the turn. And Xavier's upkeep, Vita Spore Thallid triggers. And then they cast their commander, Xavier Sal, Infested Captain. Tap, remove a counter from another permanent you control, populate, activate only as a sorcery. And tap, sack another creature, proliferate, activate only as a sorcery. Now they move to combat. They decide not to attack. And then they pass the turn. Talion plays a land. And now they cast a Grim Tutor. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle, you lose 3 life. Okay, well with 2 tutor effects in a row, they might be searching for combo pieces here. So we'll have to try to do our thing as quickly as we can. Okay, well now they're moving to their end step. Let's see if we can resolve our Gandalf. And it looks like we do. Okay, well now let's move to our turn. And we draw a Carrion Feeder. That's actually really great. Just what we needed. Let's start by playing our land. We'll play it on the flip side. Now let's cast our Gonti. That also resolves. Now thanks to Gandalf, we're going to get 2 triggers, and we're going to put both of them on the Talion player. I have a feeling they're going to have some pretty good spells, especially ones that are either cheap or free to cast. Would really love to snag a Fierce Guardianship off of them. Alright, and in this hand we have a Dark Ritual, a Grim Monolith. Yep, so definitely right, this is a faster deck. Sculpting Steel and Sleight of Hand. I think I might actually want the Dark Ritual here, because we can actually use that to hopefully cast some of our other spells this turn. especially our Priest of Fell Rights. So let's take that. Let's see what the second Gonti trigger gets us. We have 2 lands, a Mox Diamond, and a Mirror Image. Well, I definitely think we'll take the Mirror Image. That can become a copy of one of our legends, which will sack itself and we'll get even more value. So now let's move to combat. We'll send all of our creatures towards the Talion player. Damage goes through. Now in our second main phase, let's cast this Dark Ritual. That's going to give us 3 black mana. After that, we're going to cast our Priest of Fell Rights. And finally, we're going to cast our Nasty End, and we're going to sacrifice the Gonti. It's going to put 2 Ratadrabik triggers on the stack, so we're going to make 2 Gontis. Our first Gonti trigger is going to target Talion. This time we get a Copy Artifact, a Mana Vault, and a Torment of Hailfire. I think I'm going to take the Torment of Hailfire. With the second trigger, we'll target Talion once again. Some good juicy targets here. The Jeweled Lotus could help us recast Rata. But that Mirage Mirror is just too juicy to pass up. Now we'll draw 3 cards. A Blade of Selves, an Ornithopter of Paradise, as well as a Bartolome. But I think from here we can just ship the turn over. On Xavier's upkeep, Vitaspore Thallid triggers. Next they cast an Imperial Seal. Search your library for a card, then shuffle and put that card on top. You lose 2 life. Now they move to combat, but they decide not to attack. And it looks like they're leaving the turn there. They start by casting a Night's Whisper. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. They play a land for turn. Next they cast a Mystical Tutor. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top. Let's see what they find. They've decided to put a Deadly Relic on top. Well, that's going to be good for us because we can actually get that back with our Gonti. We're going to be able to do that next turn. So our opponent might not have realized that, but that is going to be it for their turn. And we draw a land. Okay, well, let's start by playing our Great Hall of the Citadel. Next, we'll cast our Carrion Feeder. Then we're going to cast our Blade of Selves. And that's enough for the Talion player to scoop it up. Unfortunately, the Blade of Selves does nothing now, but I don't think we need it. So now let's cast our Bartolome. And it looks like our final opponent has scooped it up. Alright guys, let's go to the review and discuss what happened.
Well, in this game, we had a really strong start. And thank God, because it seemed our opponents were playing really strong decks with all of their fast mana and tutors. Fortunately, we were able to resolve Gonti's triggers multiple times, and that gave us so much value that seemed to be enough for our opponents to throw in the towel. Alright, on to game 3.
Okay guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Rata, Heart of Keld. We have Toshiro Umezawa. And finally, we have Tevesh Zart, Doom of Fools. Alright, now if we take a look at this opening hand, I think we have to mulligan it. It's just going to be a little bit too slow. And I'm expecting the Toshiro player to have a lot of removal, so we've got to be a little bit faster than that. Alright, this second hand does look a lot better. We have Timna to be able to draw us cards. Priest of Fell Rights can recur our creatures, which we're probably going to need against Toshiro. And we have a good number of lands, which I actually want in this matchup, where we know it's going to get grindy. Being able to make our land drops each turn is going to make a real big difference. So let's keep this. Tevesh gets us going by playing a land. And then they pass the turn. We draw an Honor-Worn Shaku. That's actually a pretty good draw. So let's just start by playing our Isolated Chapel, which will come into play tapped, and then we'll pass the turn. Rata just plays a tap land for turn, and then they pass it over. Toshiro plays a land, but that's going to be it for them. Tevesh starts by casting a Dark Ritual. Next they cast a Night's Whisper. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. They play a land. And then they cast a Blood Artist. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. But before they move to their combat phase, it looks like Toshiro casts a Fatal Push, destroy target creature if it has mana value 2 or less, and destroy that creature if it has mana value 4 or less if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn. Now the Blood Artist dying does trigger Blood Artist, which they're definitely going to put on Toshiro. And then the Tevesh player passes the turn. We draw a Nasty End. Okay, well let's play our Scrubland. And then we're going to cast our Priest of Fell Rights. I know it's very unlikely that it's going to survive, especially with the Toshiro player, but we can't hold back. We do have to play our creatures out. So let's just pass the turn. Rata plays a fetch land. They crack it right away. They put a Tiger into play. Now they cast Into the North. Search your library for a snow land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. And that's going to be it for them. Toshiro plays a land. But once again, they're just passing the turn with open mana. And it looks like the Tevesh player isn't actually doing anything and they're just passing the turn there. So it seems they've missed a land drop, which is unfortunate for them. And we draw a Reanimate. Well, that's something good to see. It's going to help us when our creatures start dying. So let's start by playing our land for turn. And let's see if we can get our Timna down and hopefully draw into some cards this turn. Now we're going to attempt to move to combat. Looks like Toshiro does have a response here. And they cast a Defile targeting Timna. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. So unfortunately, as expected, one of our creatures does get removed. Now we will actually swing at the Toshiro player. I don't want to bring Timna back this turn just yet. And then we're going to pass the turn. Rata starts by casting a Gruul Signet. And then they cast an Explore. You may play an additional land this turn and draw a card. They do play a land. And then they pass the turn. Toshiro plays an Urza's Saga for turn. And then they cast a Power Word Kill, targeting our Priest of Fell Rights. Destroy target non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon creature. So this is definitely looking like it's going to be a tough game for us. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world that the Priest of Fell Rights is in our bin, because we can actually unearth it to get back creatures. But we're going to have to be a lot more careful than usual with what we actually cast if we want to be able to keep some sort of board state, because we are a heavy creature deck. But that is going to be it for the Toshiro player. Tevesh starts by casting a Jet Medallion. Black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. But that's going to be it for them. We draw a Prismatic Vista. Let's play that land for turn. We'll crack it right away. We'll put into play our planes, seeing as we have an Urborg in our hand. Now we're going to cast our commander. I feel a little more safer that it's going to stick around because it has Ward 2. One of the many great things about this commander, when you get it down early, it's very unlikely that people are going to try to remove it because they're essentially going to have to spend their whole turn doing so. But that's going to be it from us. Rata starts their turn by casting a Renin 7. +1, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all land cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. 0 is put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. -3, create a green tree folk creature token with reach, and this creature's power and toughness reach equal to the number of lands you control. And -8, return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size. A lot of words on one card, that's for sure. Now they decide to use the reveal ability. Let's see if they hit any lands. And it looks like they don't. That'll all go to the graveyard. And then they pass the turn. Toshiro's first main phase, their Urza's Saga triggers. So now they have the ability to make a construct token. Next they cast a Demonic Tutor. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. And that's going to be it for them. Tevesh starts by casting a Demonic Tutor of their own. Next they cast a Mana Crypt, no doubt what they tutored up. And then they cast a Demon's Disciple. When it ETBs, each player sacks a creature or planeswalker. Well, that's unfortunate for us, because we were hoping to keep our commander. But I guess on the plus side, Rata does lose their planeswalker. We're going to leave our commander in the graveyard so we can reanimate it. But that's going to be it for the Tevesh player. We draw a Yawgmoth for turn. Let's start by playing our Urborg. Next, we'll cast our Reanimate. We're going to bring back Rata. Next, we'll cast our Honorworn Shaku. And that way we can hold up our Nasty End, so in case someone tries to remove Rata, we'll at least be able to draw a couple of cards from it. But let's pass the turn from here. Rata begins by playing a Scoot Swarm. Whenever a land ETB is under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. Pretty dangerous card in a landfall deck. And then they follow that up with a Farseek. Search your library for a Plains, Island, Swamp, or Mountain card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. When that land ETBs, that triggers Scoot Swarm. And that's going to be it for them. Toshiro's first main phase, their Urza's Saga triggers. They're going to search their library for an artifact card with a mana value of 0 or 1 and put it onto the battlefield. And they get themselves a Mana Crypt. Next they play a land for turn. Then they cast a Jet Medallion. And then they cast a Wishclaw Talisman. It ETBs with 3 wish counters on it, and pay 1 tap, remove a wish counter from it. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. An opponent gains control of Wishclaw Talisman. Activate only during your turn. It looks like they're activating it straight away. Okay, well let's see who gets the talisman. And it looks like they're giving it to the Rata player. But that is going to be it for their turn. On the Tevesh player's upkeep, Mana Crypt triggers. And they win the flip. Next they play a land. And now they cast a Harvester of Souls. Death Touch, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. A great card against what our deck is doing, but if everything goes to plan and we get our Sheoldred down next turn, I think we should be able to take care of that. And that is going to be it for them. And we draw an Esper Sentinel. Alright, well Sheoldred is probably our best plan of attack, so let's do that. But first we'll move to combat. We'll swing Rata towards Toshiro. The damage goes through. And now let's cast Sheoldred. And that's going to be it from us. Now on Rata's upkeep, Sheoldred triggers. So they will have to sacrifice a creature. And they sacrifice their insect token. Next they play a land for turn, a Rogue's Passage. That triggers their Scoot Swarm. Next they activate the Wishclaw Talisman. And I have a feeling that they're not going to be giving it to us. And it's the Tevesh player that gets it. After that, Rata casts the Sky Shroud Claim. Search your library up to 2 forest cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. I don't think it's going to be too long before we're overwhelmed with Scoot Swarms. When those lands ETB, that triggers Scoot Swarm 4 times. And finally, they cast a Moss Diamond. Now they move to combat. And they send one of their Scoot Swarms towards the Toshiro player. They have to take the damage. And then Rata passes the turn. Toshiro's upkeep, our Sheoldred as well as Mana Crypt triggers. Sheoldred won't matter because they don't have any creatures. And they win the flip. Then they cast an Orcish Bowmasters. Flash, when it ETBs and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target, then a Mass Orcs 1. When it ETBs, they target one of the Scoot Swarm tokens. And then they cast the One Ring, which with that art is pretty hard to read, so I'm not going to read it, but essentially it gives you protection when it ETBs, and you can tap it to draw a card for each counter on it. They immediately draw straight away. Then they play a land. Now it is a colorless land, so we shouldn't have to worry about too much removal, at least for the next rotation of the table. And then they pass the turn. On Tevish's upkeep, our Sheoldred triggers as well as Mana Crypt, so they will have to sacrifice the Harvester of Souls. But it looks like they're activating the Wishclaw Talisman in response. The Harvester goes down, and they win the flip. Next they play a land. And then they cast a Torment of Hailfire with X equals 4. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacks a non-land permanent or discards a card. That's actually pretty good news for us because we didn't have a sack outlet on board at the moment, so we're actually going to sacrifice Sheoldred. That's going to trigger our commander. And then we'll lose 9 life for the rest of it. And then Tevesh passes the turn to us. On our upkeep, Sheoldred triggers. We're going to return our original Sheoldred. We also draw a Phyrexian Altar. Now I really want to draw some cards here. I think we need to find some better answers. So as much as I'm not going to like losing our 2/2 Sheoldred, I think we're going to have to try to cast our nasty end here. Sacrifice our original Sheoldred and draw some more cards. We certainly could play Yawgmoth here, but it's only going to get us a few cards at a time, and we'd really have to sacrifice our board to get the same amount of cards that Nasty End would give us. So it's a sacrifice I think we have to make here. We'll tap down Shelly before we sacrifice her, just so we don't waste the mana. Now let's cast our Nasty End. Sacking that triggers Ratadrabik. Now we'll draw 3 cards. We get ourselves a Lauren, a land, as well as a Carrion Feeder. Unfortunately, that does trigger Orcish Bowmaster 3 times. As much as I'd like them to take out the Scoot Swarms, yep, they're definitely going to target our Shelly token. So the first 2 triggers go on Shelly, and the third goes on one of the Scoot Swarms. Next, we'll play our Great Hall. Now we're going to unearth our Sheoldred. So we'll use that Priest of Fell Rites that died earlier. We sacrifice it and pay 3 life. And Sheoldred's back on the battlefield. Finally, we'll cast our Carrion Feeder. So at least we have a sack outlet on board. Now we'll move to combat. Rata can go towards the Tevesh player. They can't block, so they'll take the damage. And that's going to be it for our turn. On Rata's upkeep, 2 Sheoldred triggers go on the stack. So they'll lose 2 Scoot Swarms here. Somebody's got to keep this Scoot army under control. Next, they play a Zendikar's Royal. Whenever a land ETB is under your control, create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. And then they cast an Ashaya Soul of the Wild. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. That's going to be a very powerful combination with Scoot Swarm and Zendikar's Royal. Now when Ashaya does ETB, that triggers Scoot Swarm twice and Zendikar's Royal. Now they move to combat, and they're sending their Scoots towards the Tevesh player. They take the damage, and then Rata passes the turn. On Toshiro's upkeep, both of our Shellys trigger as well as the One Ring and Mana Crypt. Thankfully we get rid of the Orcish Bowmasters there. They'll lose a life to the One Ring, and then they lose the flip, taking 3 damage. Now they activate their One Ring straight away. So now they draw 2 cards. They play a land for turn. And now they cast their commander, Toshiro Umezawa. Bushido 1, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard. If that spell would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So a commander very much built for removal tribal. And we've definitely seen in this game that that's the case. Now the next spell they cast is an Infernal Grasp, and that's targeting our original Sheoldred. Probably would have targeted the token there myself. It's destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. We are going to let that one go through. We want them to lose the 2 life. And that does trigger Toshiro as well as our commander. So we'll make a token copy of Shelly. And it looks like they're targeting with their commander's ability, the Power Word Kill. They're actually using that this time to target Ratadrabik. Now they will have to pay Ward 2. And they do pay it. In response, we're going to sacrifice Rata 2 Carrion Feeder. That way our Carrion Feeder can get a +1/+1 counter. And we're going to leave Rata in the graveyard. It might be a little risky because the Tevesh player certainly could wipe the board. And then we'll be in a little bit of trouble, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. I think if the Tevesh player did have a board wipe, we would have seen it earlier. So Carrion Feeder gets the +1/+1 counter. And that fizzles the power word kill. But that is going to be it for their turn. On Tevesh's upkeep, both of our Shellies trigger, which won't really matter, but their mana crypt will. This time they lose the flip, taking 3 damage. Next they play a land. Then they cast a Sir Conrad the Grim. Whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent, and for 1 and a black, each player mills a card. A little bit of a problematic creature for our sack plan, just something we'll have to keep in mind. And then they also cast their commander, Tevesh Zat, Doom of Fools. After that, they uptick their commander, making 2/0/1 Black Thrall creature tokens. And that is going to be it for their turn. Well, good news for us, both of our Shellies survived, which means we're going to be able to bring Rata back with a friend. So on our upkeep Shelly triggers, the first will definitely be Rata, and the second is going to be Sheoldred. And that actually has the Toshiro player scooping it up. So it seems the resilience of Rata was a little too much for them to handle. I mean, I have to admit, considering all the removal we've actually seen this game, we've done pretty good to be able to stick it out. This is one of the really great strengths of this deck. It is very resilient, especially to generic removal that isn't an exile type effect. We also draw a Phyrexian Tower for turn. Let's play that land. Next, we're going to cast our Phyrexian Altar. Now we're going to activate our Phyrexian Tower. We're going to sacrifice our original Sheoldred. That's going to trigger Rata as well as Sir Conrad. Now we're going to cast our Yawgmoth. After that, we're going to cast our Lauren. And that ETBs, I think we're going to target the Zendikar's Royal. Just too dangerous a card to leave out with a landfall deck. Now we're going to activate Yawgmoth. We're going to target Sir Conrad and we're going to sacrifice our Lauren. When that goes down, that triggers Yawgmoth, Rata as well as Sir Conrad. When the Lauren token ETBs, we're going to target the mana crypt of the Tevesh player. Now we'll also put a -1/-1 counter on Sir Conrad and we'll draw a card. We get ourselves a Blade of Souls. That would have been nice just a little bit earlier, especially when we had access to a little bit more mana. Finally, I think we'll round it out by casting our Esper Sentinel. Now we're going to move to combat. We're going to send our Sheoldred tokens towards Tevesh Zat because they do have Swamp Walk, so they can't actually be blocked. Just making sure Tevesh doesn't get to that devastating ultimate ability. And then we're just going to leave the turn there. On Rata's upkeep, 3 of our Sheoldreds trigger. Unfortunately, each time one of these Scoot Swarms dies that they sacrifice, we are taking a damage from it. It's something we have to do. We can't let those Scoot Swarms run rampant, otherwise they just will take over the game. And we've been pretty lucky so far that Sheoldred has been able to keep them in check, at least for the moment. Now Rata casts a Rampaging Balos, Trample, and whenever a land ETB is under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. When that ETBs, that triggers Scoot Swarm twice, as well as Rampaging Balos. Next, they cast their commander, Rata Heart of Keld. As long as it's your turn, Rata has first strike. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands from the top of your library. And 6 mana, Rata gets +X/+X, where X is the number of lands you control. When Rata ETBs, that triggers Scoot Swarm 4 times, as well as Rampaging Balos. And then they play a land for turn, which triggers Scoot Swarm 8 times, as well as Rampaging Balos. And then they cast a Nature's Law, which does trigger our Esper Sentinel. That is about to be a lot of Scoot Swarms. And we draw a Rankle Master of Pranks. So a whole bunch of Scoot Swarm triggers go on the stack, as well as that Rampaging Balos. But it seems that was too much for Magic Online to handle because the game has actually crashed, which is a little unfortunate, but that is the game done there, guys. So let's go to the review and discuss what happened. I have to start by saying that had the game not crashed, I think Rata almost certainly would have won this game, just simply because they were so far ahead on board. But in saying that, man, our deck did awesome in the face of so much removal. If you ever want to see how resilient Rata can be, then this was the game to show it. Turn after turn, we just kept bouncing back, and that actually caused one of our opponents to scoop because of it. Alright, on to our last game. Okay, who are we playing this game? First up is the Myca Tyrant. Second up is Joda the Unifier. And finally we have Clavelino, First of the Blessed. Alright, let's take a look at this opening hand. It's not really too good. Sheoldred's pretty expensive. We do have a sack outlet, but we have reanimation and not really anything worthwhile to reanimate. So I think we're probably going to have to mulligan this. Alright, this second hand is a pretty easy mulligan. We only have 1 land and it produces colorless mana. So we're definitely shipping this one. Alright, and this third hand looks a lot better. We'll definitely keep this. We have ramp. Our curve is actually quite low, which is really, really nice. So we just have to decide what we put to the bottom of our library here. And it is a little bit of a tough choice. But to be honest, I think it actually has to be the Elixir core. It's probably the least useful to us at the moment. Joda gets us going by playing a tap land for turn. And then they pass it over. Clavileno plays a land. And now they cast a Wayfarer's Bauble. Pay 2, tap and sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. And then they pass the turn to us. We draw an Ancient Tomb, which is a really good draw. Okay, so I think this turn we get down our Ancient Tomb and we cast our Ornithopter of Paradise. And after that, we'll pass the turn. Myco Tyrant just plays a tap land for turn. And that is it for them. Joda plays a land. And then they pass the turn. Clavileno plays their land for turn. And then they activate their Wayfarer's Bauble. Now they put a basic land onto the battlefield tapped. And then they pass the turn. We draw an Elish Norn. Okay, well we're going to start by playing our Bloodstained Mire. We're going to crack it. We'll put into play our Scrubland. And then now we're going to cast our Commander. And that's going to be it for us. The Myco Tyrant plays a land. Next they cast a Sol Ring. And then they cast a Harrow. Sacrificing a land so they can put 2 basic lands into play. And then they follow that up with a Howling Mine. At the beginning of each player's draw step, if Howling Mine is untapped, that player draws an additional card. But in response, Joda casts an Enlightened Tutor. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top. Alright, let's see what they find. And it looks like they get themselves a Chromatic Lantern. But that's going to be it for the Myco Tyrant player. On Joda's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. They play a land for turn. And now they cast their Chromatic Lantern. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and it can tap for 1 mana of any color itself. After that, they cast a Delighted Halfling. Tap to add a colorless or add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. Pretty good mana dork in a legendary tribal deck. And that's going to be it for them. Clavileno's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. They play a Shock Land. They lose 2 life, so it comes into play untapped. Then they cast a Master of Dark Rites. Tap, sack another creature, add 3 black mana, spend this mana only to cast Vampire, Cleric, and or Demon spells. Then they cast a Dusk Legion Zealot. When it ETBs, you draw a card and lose a life. And then they pass the turn. We draw an Hour on our turn. Very good draw there. Howling Mine also triggers on our draw step. And that draws us into a land, which was very needed. Okay, well let's start by playing our Isolated Chapel. Next, we'll cast our Bartolome, just to make sure we have a sack outlet on board. And I think it's time we get down our Lauren. At ETBs, we're going to destroy the Chromatic Lantern. Try to slow down the Joda player a little bit. Next, we're going to use Bartolome to sacrifice Lauren. That's going to trigger Bartolome as well as our commander. When our Lauren token ETBs, we're going to take out the Sol Ring of the Myco Tyrant player. Also try to slow them down a little bit as well. Now we'll move to combat. We're going to send Rata towards the Joda player. Very unlikely that they block with their Delighted Halfling. And they just take the damage. And I think we can leave our turn there. The Myco Tyrant's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. Next they play a land. And then they cast their commander. It has trample, its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or saprolines. At the beginning of your end step, create X11 black fungus creature tokens with. This creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn. Now they move to the end step and their commander triggers. But they don't make any tokens, and that is it for their turn. Joda's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. They play a land. But it looks like the Joda player is just passing their turn, leaving their mana open. Clavileno's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. They play a land. Next, they cast a Talisman of Hierarchy. And after that, they cast their commander. Whenever you attack target attacking vampire that isn't a demon and becomes a demon in addition to its other types, it gains when this creature dies, draw a card and create a tapped 4/3 white and black vampire creature token with flying. Now they move to combat. They send their Zealot towards the Myco Tyrant player. That triggers their commander. And it does target the Zealot. Myco Tyrant just takes the damage. And then Clavileno passes the turn. We draw a Mangara and Howling Mine also triggers. And that gets us a Phyrexian Tower, very good land. So let's start by casting Owl. Next we'll play our Phyrexian Tower. We're going to use the tower to sacrifice Owl. That's going to trigger our commander as well as Owl. We're going to look at the top 7 and see what we can find. If we're lucky we can chain Owl multiple times. We just need to hit some sort of reanimation spell. We get a Black Market Connections as well as a Gonti. Well, I think we've definitely got to take the Gonti here. With Gonti ETBs, we're definitely going to target the Joda player. And hopefully we get some sort of juicy legendary. I'd love to be able to make multiple copies of it. Alright, and it looks like we've got a Reki. That's really, really good card draw. We've got the Relic of Legends, an all-star in our deck, as well as Joda. Now, I don't think we really want Joda, so it's between Reki and Relic of Legends. Normally, Relic is pretty much a slam dunk because it's just so powerful in this deck, but I think we've got to take Reki here. The idea of making multiple copies of that is just too good to pass up. Now, we're also going to make a copy of our. Now, we're going to use Bartolome, and we're going to sacrifice our token. Look at the top 7 again. Alright, that's a great hit there. We've hit some reanimation, which means we can do the owl loop again. Now, the only question is, which reanimation spell do we want to actually take? I think we might take the Animate Dead. And that ETBs, we're going to target Owl and bring it back. Let's sack Owl again. That's going to trigger Rata, Animate Dead, as well as Owl. Okay, this time we get a Yawgmoth, a Yaheni, and an Eldersil Core. Well, I think we've got to take the Yawgmoth. That's the card advantage that we're desperately after. It's going to be really great in response to any sort of board wipes our opponents might try to use on us. Now Rata makes a token copy of Owl. And Bartolome continues to get bigger. Now it's going to become a 5/4. Now we're going to use Bartolome to sacrifice Owl again. This time we had a Relic of Legends and the Kenris Royal Funeral. Two pretty tough targets, but I think it's got to be the Relic of Legends here. We've got card draw online. Now we just need to be able to accelerate our mana better. Now we're going to use our Relic to float some mana from our legendary creatures. And let's cast our Elish Norn. Well, if the Jodo player has a counterspell, they're certainly going to use it here. But luckily it does resolve. That pretty much wipes the board clear of our opponent's creatures. The Dust Legion Zealot Dying triggers its ability. So now we'll become a 4/3 black and white vampire. And Clavelina is also going to draw a card. Now we'll move to combat. We're going to send Lauren towards the Claveleno player. They take the damage. Now in our second main phase, we're going to tap down our Elish Norn. We'll get Scroll onto the battlefield. Provide our key creatures that bit of protection that we're going to really need. Particularly Elish Norn. We really want to keep that creature down on the battlefield. And after that big turn for us, I think we can just pass it over. On the Myco Tyrant's draw step, Howling Mind triggers. They play a land. And then they cast a Pile-on, targeting Elish Norn. It has Convoke, destroy target creature or planeswalker, surveil 2. Okay, well, we're going to respond to that. We're going to activate Yawgmoth, and we're going to sacrifice Elish Norn. We'll put the -1/-1 counter onto the Vampire Demon, which will kill it. And when Elish Norn dies, that triggers Ratadrabik. So we're going to make a token copy. And importantly, sacrificing Elish Norn there is going to ensure that they won't be able to surveil 2 with their Pile-on because it's going to fizzle the spell. And we draw ourselves a Malakir Rebirth. Absolutely perfect because we have Scroll on the field, so we are going to be able to use that should our opponents decide to interact with any of our other creatures. And that is it for the Myco Tyrant player. Joda's draw step, Howling Mind triggers. But after that, it looks like the Joda players scooped it up. So now we only have 2 opponents left. So now we move to Claveleno's draw step where Howling Mind triggers. And then they cast an Austere command. It looks like they're destroying all creatures with mana value 3 or less, as well as all creatures with mana value 4 or more. So pretty much wiping the board here. Okay, well, we definitely want to keep our Ratadrabik around, so we're going to respond here. We're going to tap down our Scroll. We're going to cast our Malakir Rebirth, targeting our commander. That goes through. Now in response, we're also going to activate Lauren, targeting the Myco Tyrant, and we'll draw a card. That just gets us an Arcane Signet. Next, we're going to use Yawgmoth, because we still want to draw more cards. We're going to sacrifice Lauren. We get a Dance of the Dead, that's really good. Let's do that again, this time targeting our Ornithopter of Paradise. This time we hit a land. And now we're going to sacrifice our Elish Norn token. And that gets us an Erebos. Alright, we'll let the Austere command resolve. That's going to put a bunch of Ratadrabik triggers on the stack. When Gonti ETBs, we're going to target the Myco Tyrant. Looks like we have the choice of the Dreadhound or a Malakir Rebirth. I'll take another Malakir Rebirth. I think it's going to be pretty useful for us in this game. Now we pretty much get all of our creatures back as zombies. Now Claveleno also plays a land for turn, a Bajuka Bog, which is really unfortunate because they're targeting us. Which now nullifies our Dance of the Dead. I think we would have had a pretty big turn had they not done that. We say goodbye to our graveyard. At least we do have a relatively full hand now moving to our turn. And that is going to be it for the Claveleno player. We draw a Marble Diamond and Howling Mind triggers on our draw step. And that gets us an Esper Sentinel. Okay, well, let's play our Great Hall. Next, we're going to cast our Erebos. Now we're going to move to combat. We're going to send everything we have towards the Claveleno player, because they're the ones going to be more than likely to be able to answer our board with some sort of exile effect. We don't want to see something like a Farewell hit our board. Damage goes through. And that knocks them down to 22 life. Now in our second main phase, we're also going to cast our Mangara. We'll tap down Ratadrabik to do so. And then I think we're going to tap down Erebos as well as Mangara. And we'll use them to cast our Arcane Signet. That way that's going to give us the 1 mana open that we need to be able to cast the Malakir Rebirth. It'll certainly be something that our opponents won't expect because they know we've already cast it once already, so they're not going to be expecting it again. And I think that's going to be it for our turn. On the Mycotyrant's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. They play a land. Next they cast a Cryptolith Rite. Creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any colour. Then they also cast a Blood Artist. Now that does trigger our Mangara, so we'll draw a card. That gets us an Altar of Dementia. Blood Artist says whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses a life and you gain a life. And that's going to be it for them. On Claveleno's draw step, Howling Mine triggers. Next they cast a Demonic Tutor, which isn't good news for us. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. Let's just keep our fingers crossed that they don't run farewell. Then they play a land. Alright, Moment of Truth. And no, it looks like we don't. They actually cast a Dam Overloaded. That also triggers our Mangara. And we draw a Rankle. Okay, well I think we respond here once again. Let's start by casting the Malako Rebirth targeting our commander. Our opponents are probably going to be a little surprised to see that. They're probably thinking, how did we actually cast that again? That resolves. Now let's activate Yawgmoth. We're going to target Blood Artist here so we don't lose too much life. We'll start by sacrificing Gonti. That triggers Blood Artist and Erebos. And the Blood Artist targets us. We will pay the life to draw with Erebos. And that gets us a land. The Blood Artist goes down, but that does trigger Blood Artist. Probably hits us again. But no, this time they're actually targeting Claveleno. Now we're going to sacrifice Bartolome. That'll trigger Erebos once again. We're happy to pay the life. And that gets us an Elender. Okay, well we're going to be able to gain all of that life right back. And finally, we'll sacrifice our Skrelv. That triggers Erebos yet again. We'll pay the life yet again. But it looks like the Claveleno player decides to scoop it up. Now we only have the Mycotyrant left. And that also draws us a Mondrak. Now on our draw step, Howling Mine triggers. And that gets us a Grave Pact. Okay, well we've pretty much got everything we need here. I think it's going to be very tough for the Mycotyrant player to be able to break through what we've got at the moment. Now our only question is how we decide to basically finish this game. I do think we start by casting a Lender. We really want to gain some of our life back. And a Lender's going to work really great just in case the Mycotyrant player does draw into a board wipe. And if you're going to make tokens, who better to put on the board than Mondrak? So let's get Mondrak down now. Now we're going to move to combat. We're going to attack with Ratadrabik and Yawgmoth. Keep Erebos and Mangara back. Damage goes through. Now in our second main phase, we're going to activate Yawgmoth. We're going to sacrifice our Elender. That's going to trigger Elender, Erebos, as well as Ratadrabik. So now we're going to make 2 Elender tokens. I'm not going to worry about drawing here. I think we have everything we need. We'll also make 2 Vampire tokens thanks to Elender dying. And then we draw a Sheoldred the Apocalypse. Next, let's tap down some of our legends. And let's cast our Dance of the Dead targeting an Elender. That's going to bring it back to the battlefield tapped. And I think that's pretty much it for our turn. Provided nothing crazy happens, I think we can pretty much close the game out here. Now we will have to discard a couple of cards. I don't think we need our Marble Diamond. We certainly don't need our Charcoal Diamond. And for our third card, I think we'll get rid of our Polluted Delta. The Mycotyrant's draw step, the Howling Mine triggers. And the Mycotyrant player concedes the game there. Alright guys, that is the game done. Let's go to the review and discuss what happened.
This was a really enjoyable game to close out the video. We once again had a strong start and were able to generate good value in the early to mid game, keeping our opponents in check. But once we hit the late game, we were able to survive through 2 board wipes and overwhelm our opponents in pure aristocratic value. Well, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing just what Rat is capable of and why for some of us, it's become our favourite commander to bring to the table. Until next time, guys.